Hello and welcome, everybody. I'm Sheila Ronning, CEO and founder of Women in the Boardroom. Thank you so much for joining us today. We work with senior level executive women who are either already serving on corporate boards or who aspire to serve on a corporate board. Providing quality content and knowledge about board service is just one of the many offerings that we have. And today we have a lot of great content for you. We have our speaker is Dr. Lola Gershfeld, and she is the founder and CEO of Level 5 Executive. She has developed protocols that transform boards into effective teams that are engaged with the vital work they do to govern Fortune 1000 companies. And today she is talking on increasing board effectiveness through emotions. And Lola, I am now going to turn the mic over to you, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are here with us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start off by sharing my first board experience. About 15 years ago, I served on a company board that was well diverse with highly intelligent people. I had about 15 years of experience in building and running manufacturing company, and I was pretty confident. But I couldn't believe how completely useless and incompetent I felt when some of our board members would get into these awful fights. I couldn't stop them fighting. I didn't really understand what they were fighting about. It was pretty obvious to me that they weren't fighting just about content issues. There was something much more at stake. Whenever I would support one side or the other, they would get angry at me, or somebody would shut down and not talk. I tried to teach them communication skills. They didn't want to use communication skills. I tried to teach them negotiation skills. Well, that didn't work either. So these fights would continue on, and our board meetings would get dragged on for hours with no progress. I would leave meetings drained and hopeless and disappointed. Then one day, I asked board members to take 5-minute breaks every hour and go around the room, give handshakes to each other. I mean, literally, we set the clock every hour and go around the room to give handshakes to each other. And goodness me, this time it worked. That particular meeting was one of our most productive meetings we've had in a long time. For the life of me, I couldn't understand why that silly exercise worked. And now I know that it was because of emotional connection. I'm excited to say that we have cracked the code of board effectiveness. What this means is that you can take actually any board, any size at any stage, apply the process of emotional connection, and deliberately shape its board's performance. So today, I will share with you the new science of emotional connection, how it can help you to address your common board problems, and the actionable steps you can take to improve your board effectiveness. It requires us to shift a perspective in a number of ways. The first shift is our dependency on each other. Over the last several years, our society has valued independence over dependence. We've had all kinds of theories and words basically degrading dependency. And what this new science says is, by nature, we are dependent. By nature, our brains are tuned to find others and hold on to others. Emotional connection is wired into our brain and designed to keep the people we depend on close to us. It is an ancient survival code and a powerful survival code, and the most strongest amongst us accept the need for others and know how to create what we call constructive dependency. Constructive dependency, also known as secure attachment, is when we accept our need for attachment. We accept our need for emotional connection and support. We can regulate our emotions enough to tune into those needs. We know how to reach for each other in a way that pulls us close. And when we pull us close, we can accept, care, and support. And that makes us stronger. It makes us feel better about ourselves. It reassures us that we can face danger and survive. It helps us to have the confidence we need to explore the world and address challenges together. The second shift is that when people talk about board performance, their focus is mainly on controlling the board. I know of a company whose CEO is very much about controlling over what board does and the decision it makes, which limits its board's performance. And what this new science says is in order for the board to work cohesively together, collaborate, and come up with great ideas, it requires an incredible amount of attunement and coordination. Emotional connection potentiates that attunement and coordination. The other day, I had lunch with an attorney who said that number of his clients, CEOs, complains that the board members don't give enough strategic ideas to the CEO. Well, the evidence shows that the emotionally strong teams have the best collaborations, find it most thrilling, and collaborate most often, which all lead to great ideas and better results. The third, perhaps the biggest shift of all, is to say that people think that the most powerful motivator in business is money and power. And what the new science says is no, there's a much more powerful instinct than that. It is called longing for emotional connection. It is a powerful drive because it is a survival code. And let me illustrate with an example of how emotional connection can empower a board. A couple of years ago, and you know probably this case, Allergan, a pharmaceutical company right here in Irvine, was defending its hostile takeover by Valeant. The board consisted of 10 members, 2 women and 8 men. Only 2 board members had any experience with a hostile takeover. The rest did not. 2 board members were brand new to serve on any public company board, and 1 joined the board just a year short of this huge ordeal for the company. As you can imagine, the stress level was high. Besides the governance and the legal issues, there was a lot of pressure from investors, attorneys, and media. Some were saying, take the deal. The other says, they were saying, don't take the deal. So there was a lot of fears of making a wrong decision, a fear of not making a decision, a fear of being sued and losing their entire livelihood, a fear of losing credibility in the business community. And overwhelmingly, the new science says that emotional connection sees fear as the most damaging in human functioning. And on top of that, there was a lot of personal attacks coming from the other side and from some of the investors. There were name calling, public shaming, and threats, all of which added a lot of stress. And it wasn't just a day or week or month, it was over 7 months. When we feel stressed, our brain produces a hormone called cortisol. When it is produced over a short period of time, it helps us to manage our survival. It alerts us of danger, and we can immediately respond to protect ourselves. However, when the cortisol is produced over a period of time, of a long period of time, it starts to negatively affect your brain. It slows down your cognitive abilities. You can become irrational in your thoughts and decisions. You are less likely to try new ideas and take healthy risks. You are less likely to collaborate and integrate other people's ideas. Your social skills, such as respect and empathy, greatly diminish, and your risk in triggering a negative cycle greatly increases. However, when people you depend on can provide you with care and support, your body starts to produce good chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, which sets off the level of cortisol in your body, allowing you to regain your emotional balance. And you become again creative, open, and collaborative. When we are emotionally connected with our board members, we can accept the help we need. And that is exactly what Mike Gallagher and the Allergan, the lead director, did for their board to focus on. They focused on helping each other maintain that emotional connection, to stay on track, to be united and strong until they were able to find another buyer, activist, with whom they'd merged and received $25 billion more for the company than the Valiant's original offer. So what were some of the things that Allergan did? The first thing they did is they held executive sessions, first with the CEO present and then without the CEO present. This created safety for the board members to share their worries and concerns openly and ask questions without worrying that it somehow may affect the CEO. Mike served as a liaison between the board and the CEO. So when the board needed more clarification, Mike would talk to the CEO to get more information. Having one person in charge of that communication during a high level of stress helps to regulate the anxiety of the group, so it doesn't get too overwhelming and trigger a threat to the brain for the CEO or any other board member. So when questions or comments are fueled by anxiety, our emotional signals get distorted. And instead of sounding concerned or worried, our statements come out as a demand, blame, or criticism, which is a danger cue for another person's mammalian brain. Recently, in fact, the Common Sense Corporate Governance Principles was published. Some of you may know this. And one of the principles includes having sessions without the CEO present. Having such a buffer creates safety for the brain and maintains emotional connection and ensures that the board and the CEO stays on its path. The second thing they did was to implement a mandatory engagement and validate differences, and that creates value. At every board meeting, Mike made sure that everyone was given a chance to share his or her views and opinions. Being heard goes back to our innate need to belong. Feelings of belonging creates emotional safety. Whenever there were differences, Mike would remind board members that all opinions and differences are valid and to be considered. I was at a board meeting the other day where one board member was sharing his concerns and the other started to criticize him. You could just see how they were getting themselves into a pattern of attack and defend. And I said, I think you guys are both saying something very important here. Sam, your concerns are valid. Sue, you have a really valid concern as well. I know you both care about this company and you both care about this issue. And as soon as I said that, you could just see the intensity in the room diminished and people's faces became much more relaxed, which allowed them to move forward. Validating someone's opinion and feelings is one of the effective ways to soothe and calm emotions. The third thing that Mike was really good at was demonstrating empathy. He would make sure that board members felt that their concerns and fears were heard and understood. This eliminates a feeling of loneliness and isolation. Loneliness and isolation are two very painful and scary experiences for all human beings. And empathy what creates that connection. Empathy is also a very powerful antidote to shame. As I mentioned, the Allergan board was harshly shamed during the ordeal. And by showing empathy toward each other, board members knew that they could turn to each other for that care and support when they needed it. So these are just three things that the Allergan board did to stay united and strong. And I invite you to read all 10 ways to maintain board unity during a hostile takeover, which was published in this month's issue, NACD Directorship Magazine. The new science of emotional connection and adult bonding has significant implications for all of us. It was based on theories and research of some of the great psychologists. Carl Rogers, the founder of humanistic approach, Salvador Minuchin, the founder of family systems, and John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, who studied bonding and loneliness in 1950s and 60s. And it was actually Bowlby who said that the need for emotional connection goes from the cradle to the grave. We never grow out of it, but as adults, we don't need others all the time. We're able to carry them in our minds. Think of a time when you felt anxious or stressed. What did you do? You probably called someone that you trust, someone that you feel safe with, maybe your partner or your spouse, or maybe even another board member. And as you talk to this person, or perhaps access them in your mind, it soothes your nervous system. It changes your hormones that are released in your blood. It reduces the cortisol level and slows down your heart rate, providing you with a felt sense of safe haven. The other day, I was about to go on stage to present for a group of 100 people, and I could feel that my heart started to race. You know, you get these stage a little bit anxieties, and I was getting a comb in my throat. I had my iPad in my hands, and I turned it over, and my husband gave it to me, and he encrypted the words that he loves me, and I'm lucky to have you in my life. In a split moment, I could feel my whole body relax and calm me down. By the time I went on stage, my nervousness was completely gone. When the Allergan board members were defending their company, they would say, "We don't want to go more than 2 weeks without a board meeting." What they were actually saying was that we needed that care and support in order for us to face the danger and stay on course of protecting the company. What we're really starting to understand is how much board members impact each other. This is something that board members don't realize, and this is something that you need to pay attention to. Board members have this huge physiological impact on each other. When you work with your board, pay attention to that and see how you can help your board members to calm themselves down, to soothe each other. When they don't pay attention, they keep triggering each other and getting caught in a negative side pattern. The most common negative pattern starts with one person complaining, criticizing, and getting very angry, and the other defending, distancing, and stonewalling. One starts pushing, the other starts backing off. The more one backs off, the more the other pushes. And they get caught in this terrible negative cycle. And then the cycle gets its own momentum, and before you know what's happening, you start to think of the other person as dangerous, as an enemy, and you start to physiologically respond to them as dangerous. And the worst part is when you get caught in this negative cycle, you don't even realize what's happening. You just know it doesn't feel safe anymore. This is exactly what happened to the Apple board when Steve Jobs was fired. Jobs and the board would get stuck in these negative cycles, with blaming, judging, and criticizing each other. The board would blame, criticize, and judge Jobs. Jobs would push back, criticize, and defend board members and stonewall them by shutting down. When we shut down, we shut the other person out, which is a threat and makes everyone else on the board anxious and upset, which causes more and more disconnection. With every disconnection, the distance between Jobs and the board would increase, which eventually got to such a point that everyone saw each other as dangerous, and they fired Jobs. And even though years later Steve Jobs would say that it was the best thing that ever happened to him, in retrospect, it was a very painful experience and almost put Apple out of business. These type of negative patterns not only negatively impact board performance, they negatively impact companies' performance. A great example is the Disney board. In 2003, Roy Disney, the last living family member of Walt Disney, had to resign due to a dreadful negative cycle that him and Michael Eisner would get stuck in. This was during a time of high stress for the company, as terrorist attacks affected business. Their television network was hitting low, and their animation studio was starting to falter. So instead of leaning on each other and working together to solve problems, they turned on each other, which led Roy Disney to leave the board and call for Eisner's resignation. The key to understand is that when the board gets stuck in these negative patterns, it is not because they lack communication skills. It is not because they lack negotiation skills. Not because you have board members who are difficult to deal with. It is not because they can't agree on things or you can't resolve your conflict. And you do not need conflict management. It is because board members struggle with moments of disconnection. Disconnections for human beings who long for emotional connection is alarming. So you start pushing for connection, missing each other, threatening each other, and getting caught in this dreadful negative cycle, which leaves you feeling hurt and alone. So the goal is not just to make board members nicer to each other. The goal is to know how to step out of these patterns, reach for each other, calm each other down, soothe each other, and change the emotional signals you send to each of your board members that creates a pattern of connection, collaboration, and support. Sue Johnson, the founder of emotionally focused therapy, says this about emotions. Emotion is the music of the dance. The fastest way to change the dance is to change the music. For those who dance, and I don't know if you guys dance, but if the foxtrot music is playing and you're trying to dance a tango, it won't work. You'll keep stepping on each other's toes and hurting each other. The same applies to boards. Emotion is a direction of your board effectiveness. If you don't take the right steps, you will continue triggering each other to disconnection. This new science provides us with a clear map on what you need to make how you need to make the right steps, what you need to change. And you don't need to change everything. You have to change the core organizing elements. And the core organizing elements is how your board members deal with their emotions, the emotional signals they send to each other, and how those emotional signals create a pattern that either leads you into a secure connection or into painful chronic disconnections. And I really mean painful. Naomi Eisenberg, a neuroscience researcher at UCLA, found that emotional pain is processed in the same part of the brain and exactly the same way as physical pain. So when you feel emotional pain, it is the same as stepping on a nail. When you learn these new steps and create emotional connection, a lot of other things start to happen. You start sharing information with ease and comfort. You become much more open to take on more assignments and projects. I was at a board meeting the other day, and at the beginning of the meeting, one of the board members was saying how busy he was and how he couldn't take any more assignments. And by the end of the meeting, when his emotions were addressed and understood, he was volunteering to take on more assignments. I think that is just incredible. That is amazing to me. Your creativity flourishes with ideas and solutions, and the collaboration process becomes much more enjoyable. I was at another board meeting where board members were miles apart when I walked into the boardroom. And by the end of the meetings, when they were given a chance and created a safe place where they can express their emotions and share, and other people understood them, the collaboration started to happen. I was just sitting there watching in disbelief. You start to see people integrate each other's ideas rather than defending their position. And most importantly, you see people become much more willing to support each other, which you all need to explore new opportunities, take healthy risks, and move the company forward. The board dynamics process consists of 3 stages. The first stage is you identify the current pattern of interaction. And you do this by slowing down the interaction, reflecting the current process, reflecting the current steps, and eliminating the bad guy. Think of it as you watch sports. Something really interesting happens, and we replay it over and over again, so that we can get everyone on the same page of what just happened and what the call should be. That is basically what we're doing in stage 1. We are creating safety by slowing down the steps and identifying the 3 moves. The 3 moves that cause disconnections are reach, push, and shut down. We reach when we want help. Sometimes we don't do it very well. When we are stressed, reaching comes off sometimes as criticism or demand. At one of the board meetings, a board member says to the CEO, "Well, why can't you be more available?" So when something like this happens, when you hear somebody saying like this with a stress, try to slow them down by saying something like, "Can I just slow you down? I think you're saying something really important. What I'm hearing you say is that when the CEO is not responsive, you get really worried. Am I getting it? The person says yes. I get frustrated. When we can't reach, we push. That is done when we reach and we don't get the help we need, we push. I'll make you respond. This is a back and forth arguing. And the third move we do is we shut down. When reaching and pushing doesn't work, we push because we care, and we shut down because we feel that no one else cares. So you disengage, you stop participating. When you see someone shut down, try to reframe their concern to reestablish emotional connection and bring them back to the group. Don't leave people disengaged. It is a danger cue. I had a director who served on the bank board. One of the board members would come to a board meeting for one purpose, to vote. That's it, nothing else. He would not be engaged. He would not participate in any discussions. This negatively impacted the board members. It created stress. It created unsafe environment. Their decisions and performance was very poor. Eventually, the bank went out of business. When you see someone go into a shutdown or disengage, try to bring them back. Reframe the concerns in terms of attachment, saying things like, I know how much you care about this company. I know how much you care about this issue. I know that you want the company to succeed. And this is a good way for them to reconnect to the group. So watch for these three moves. And by the way, there's a great video on YouTube by Ed Tronick called Still Face that you can watch where he demonstrates these three moves with a baby and a mother. And you can see that these three moves are innate in all of us. So the goal of the first stage is to create safety and slow down the negative cycle so you can identify the steps on how you get disconnected. The second stage is restructuring the pattern. And this is where you start to create new steps toward a positive interactional cycle. It is done through aligning the board through the company vision, mission, and core values, pulling board members under one umbrella and moving toward the same direction. And again, remember, by this time, board members feel a lot more safer to express their concern. They're a lot more open and collaborative with each other. So when you start aligning the board, they're much more willing to come together and go into one direction. And that is what you want. Be accessible, responsive, and engaged. This is what helps the brain to maintain that emotional connection, emotional safety with each other. Enactments is when one person shares their feelings with another one to create emotional bond. I'm not going to go into detail on enactments because it's a little bit more complicated, but this could be a part 2 of this webinar. So I will go over on how you can stay accessible, responsive, and engaged. When we see connection, there's one question that our brain asks and determines safety with each other. And the question is, are you there for me? A-R-E, are you there for me? Are you accessible to me? Are you responsive? Are you engaged? To be accessible means, can you stay open to my ideas, even though you are feeling stressed, even though you do not agree with me? And this requires you to know how to manage your emotion so it does not become overwhelming for you. You can practice it by asking yourself, what is happening with me right now? What am I feeling? Try to name the emotion and it will calm you down. Eliminate dismissing comments and statements such as, you have no idea what you're talking about, or that is absurd. That is a very disturbing comment and can trigger a person to start a fight or flight response. Instead, say, I hear what you're saying and I have a different opinion. All of us have a right to a different opinion. You don't have to agree with anyone, so feel free to say, I have a different opinion. And that will keep you connected. That will keep you accessible. And take stance that everyone cares about the company as much as you do. And it's hard to do when we get into these negative patterns. You think of the other person as they don't care. So people want to succeed. So remember the reason. People react sometimes because they feel anxious or stressed. I had a board member who serves on an audit committee. And at one of his conference calls with his committee members, the discussion was getting out of hand. It was heading the wrong direction. He interrupted everyone and said, "Can we just stop here? Can we just slow it down? I just want to say something. I just want to say that the reason why we're getting so passionate is because we deeply care about this issue. And we all deeply care about this company. I just want everyone to know that." When the conversation resumed, people were speaking with a different tone. It felt much safer, and you could just tell board members were a lot more open and willing to integrate people's ideas. To be accessible helps the board to move forward, and that is your goal, to move the board forward. To be responsive means you maintain your connection with a person even though you're feeling stressed. Remember, shutting down is a danger cue to the brain. Not responding to the emails or phone calls, not sending updates, all suggest that you are disconnected. Even though you don't have an answer, try to respond and say, I got your email. I have to think about it. Give me a couple of days. And that will create calmness in the other person's brain. I was at a board meeting the other day, and the CEO said, "When you don't respond to me, I feel like I'm hanging by a thread. I feel alone." And that's a very difficult place to be in. Practice empathy, not sympathy. I invite you to watch a YouTube video called The Power of Empathy by Brene Brown and understand the difference, how to use empathy effectively. There was recently a great article on David Novak, a CEO of Yum and PepsiCo, a $33 billion company. And in his interview, he said that one of his qualities that made him an effective leader was empathy. Bill Campbell is another great example where he used empathy in his as a CEO of Intuit. Empathy creates emotional connection. Eliminate negative comments about another board member. Negative comments causes disconnection because you start to think of the other person as dangerous, as an enemy. And again, you start to respond to them physiologically as they're dangerous. You stop using their names. You stop responding to them. You stop looking at them. All of this creates disconnection and triggers a negative pattern. One of the homeworks I give when I work with the board is to tell them, do not talk badly about each other outside the board meeting. You can talk about yourself. You can say how difficult it is for you or how frustrated you feel, how much you'd like to connect with the person, but you cannot make the other person as the bad guy. Emotions are contagious. When we feel distant with the people on our board, they will sense it. The whole board will sense it, and it will respond with caution, which will trigger again a negative cycle. To be engaged means reflect the feelings behind the words. I can see how important this is for you. Reframe the statements in form of attachment. I know how much you care about this company. I mean, unless people have really bad intent and want to harm the company, and this process doesn't work for this type of group of people. But every board member who serves on a board wants to do good. Ask questions to clarify what they mean and how they feel. Something like, so if we do this, it will give you a sense of safety and comfort. Am I getting it? This will slow down the cycle and create new steps for a positive pattern to take place. Disconnections are inevitable. It is how you manage them will determine how effective your board is. Being accessible, responsive, and engaged is an antidote to negative patterns. It helps the brain to stay calm and soothed and connected, helping you create a more secure bond with each other. And the last stage, we validate and recognize. We validate the risk of sharing the feelings, staying in the process, and the effort we make in working together, pointing out the changes toward a positive cycle. By going through these three stages over and over again, you will start to experience a real coherent image, a story, and a new version of how you can manage emotions and help your board to move out of negative cycles. It's all about validation and support. This will encourage your board members to take new risks, integrate the progress you've made. The fascinating thing is, somehow that knowledge is wired into our brain. I have seen situations where board members should have never trusted each other. And when you give them enough emotional safety and support, they are willing to take that risk. Because in the end, we are homo vinculum. We are not just social animals, we are the ones who bond. And if you tap into the power of that, that is an amazing, amazing motivator for change. I've seen more individual change happen when I work with a whole board than when I work with individual board members. Nothing grows people like emotional connection. You know how the people say, nothing grows people like love. The same thing. With emotional connection, you can change your board in a lasting, significant way that becomes a more secure bond for each of your board members and drive performance and change your company. So, in conclusion, I'd like to give you 3 things that you can do at your next board meeting. Number 1, pay attention to the emotional distance. Do you feel safe and connected? Do you get stuck in a negative pattern? When you get stuck in a negative pattern, can you stand back and say, we are caught in this dreadful pattern. You must be hurting too. Or do you start blaming the other person? And by the way, you don't need to have fights in order to be caught in a negative pattern. I had a board member who was on a public company board where only 2 board members participated in discussions, and the rest 6 people would just sit in silence. This board was completely disconnected. So the first thing to do is to pay attention to the emotional distance with your board. The second thing is take an active approach and take care of disconnections sooner. I've worked with board members who have been distressed for 6, 8, 10 years. That is a long time to be unhappy. You really don't have to suffer like that anymore. The next time you get disconnected, say, wait a minute, what is happening right now? I'm not feeling safe and connected with you. And it's not that we are fighting. We are not confiding anymore. We're not supporting each other. Let's do something about it. I think that is happening more and more. The active approach is let's do something about it. And 3, eliminate the bad guy. No one needs to be blamed. There's no one at fault. Every person is suffering and struggling with connection. Divert your energy in pulling board members together to fight the cycle, not the people. You'll be much more successful in creating an effective board. The way I approach board performance is that it's not about finding that perfect board member. It is about finding board members who are passionate about your company, who believe in your vision and mission, and then creating emotional connection that will make your board more effective. And it's work. It's also the most incredible fun that you could have, and it's incredibly challenging, but it's work. You got to work at it. I invite you to read more on this amazing science of emotional connection with some references that I listed here below. And also visit our website, sign up for a newsletter, and let's continue our conversation on creating more effective boards. And I think we have some time for questions.
We do. And first of all, great presentation. Thank you so much. I love the fact that the emotional connection. That's exactly why we always say that it's the way to get onto a board is through your network, because it's the people that you know that you want to bring into that circle, right? And that you have an
Yeah.
emotional connection with.
That's very true, Sheila. That's a great way to say it. Yes, networking and learning about each other, supporting each other. That's what creates you to keep going and searching for that dream.
Yes, exactly. And I love that you reference Brene Brown. I absolutely love her and anything she talks about, right? So we do have a couple of questions that have come in. So obviously there's going to be board members who are skeptical or resistant to this process. And what are some of the strategies that you employ with them?
What you want to do is you don't want to persuade people to do anything. You want them to experience it. So when you start to learning about this by yourself and learning to the language of emotions, you want to help them so you can understand their story, their problem from an attachment point of view. It's almost like the main persuasive element is that you understand their need. Remember the attachment thing? We all need each other. We have a need for something to be secure with ourselves. So when people understand that you can connect to their needs, they say, this goes to the heart of the matter. Just like you said, I know exactly what you mean when you say emotional connection. When it feels safe, we know how it feels. So don't
Mm-hmm.
try to persuade your board members. Instead, says, can you help me? I see that you're really upset. Can you help me? What's happening right now? What's going on with you? So you can focus on creating a safe alliance for them. You can focus on knowing that you're not judging their feelings, you're not blaming or criticizing them. And that they will start to experience that, and they will become much more open to the new way of thinking.
Right. And it's never too early to even start bringing these issues up to the board. I mean, hopefully, you're not waiting until it's in a really bad place, right? But I mean, what would be a good way to bring these issues up to the board and not, you know, I mean, come on, we're women in the boardroom, right? So our members, our attendees are women. And I feel like sometimes we get pigeonholed into that. Oh, she wants to talk about emotion. So, what is a good way to bring it up to your board?
Well, the way I have done it is I would just slow it down at the time when something's happening, and I would be the one who just demonstrating. I would just say, could I just slow you down because I think you're saying something really important. What's happening? And then when the person can explain themselves and you can help them, are you feeling, and just stay in the moment, just slow it down. You want to slice it down. You can always say that I've heard a really great workshop and I'd like to bring that person. I think that emotional connection or the topic of emotions need to be addressed, and more companies are addressing the topic of emotion. You see, emotions intelligence is talked about in corporate cultures for years now, and
Right.
people create that sense of importance that emotions do matter. And I think that board members are becoming a much more understanding that the reason why you're doing this is because you do want to create more success, and that's what they want as well. So when you can align the board members that we all want the same thing, they're going to be much more open to talk about that.
Right. And then, you can also present it too. I always say our members are what I call life learners. They have no desire to just all of a sudden one day just retire and do full-time gardening. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but these women want to continue learning. So I feel like it could be presented also as a way of getting better, learning more, right?
Yes, yes, exactly. And in fact, Ed Marino is one of my colleagues, and he would say, you want to find the board members who are aligned with you, so you could start talking to them individually, maybe, and say, look, I know this, and I see that you really know how to empathize really well. I think that you should do that more often. Or,
Mhm.
let's engage the other person. How do we engage them? And let's start the conversation and how to do that. And then I think people will see the results happening, and when people see that you are moving forward and you start collaborating, they will feel better. They will feel safer to express more and more concerns and share information with each other.
Great. Yeah. And so another question was, how do I connect with someone when they're already shut down? Love that question.
You don't want to embarrass them, obviously, in the front of the group. You can talk to them to see if you can talk to them and bring their point across. Try to support them. The reason why they shut down again, because they think no one cares as much as they do. So if you can align with them that you do care what they're saying, you do care how the concerns are they have, or the worries they have, you will start to bring them back. And yourself, when I also, I mean, I teach the stuff and it happens to me too. When I shut down, I make myself to start talking and participating, because that's hard to do. But once you understand that people care about you and people care about the company as much as you do, that kind of soothes you and brings your emotions down so you can get back to the conversation.
Yeah, great. And then, so another question was, how long do the three stages take?
It depends on the board. It depends on the stage of like how connected or disconnected the board is. I have seen the process take between 12 to 18 months, but you see the immediate improvement. I mean, like I said, at the first board meeting, when I walked in, and these board members were miles apart from each other, and by the end they were talking to each other and already taking some assignments, and then the next board meeting again they're disconnected. So it is the process. It's like learning a dance. It takes time for you to learn the routine of the dance, and the same thing, you learning new steps, the emotional signals that you need to send to each other. First you have to learn about your emotions. First you have to understand, what am I feeling, what's happening with me? And sometimes it's really hard to get it. So with another person who can help you to understand your emotions, you will start to learn how to send clear emotional signals to each other, and that's how the new pattern starts to develop.
Hmm. Yeah. And okay, another one. So remember how we talked about you probably want to get your board on board, no pun intended, with this before it's too out of control. But I mean, are there certain signs or ways to tell if your board is disconnected?
Pay attention to the emotional distance. When you start to sense, when you start to kind of paying attention to that, and you see that board members are not there for you, or you can't really share your concerns with them, or they're not listening to you, or it's really becoming too dangerous for you to do that, or you don't want to do that. When you have that sense, that means your board is in trouble. That means you need to do something about it. And you have to have a lot of courage. You just have to know that the reason why you're doing it, you don't want to blame. When you bring the issues up without blaming, criticism, or judgment, you will pull the board members together. You will allow them to feel safe with each other. So if you can have the courage to know that the board members are struggling and they want to be connected, that will give you a lot of strength to talk about it and say, I feel like we are not confiding anymore. I feel like we are not supporting each other. And I'm wondering if anyone else feels the same way. And that will start a conversation.
Hmm. Great questions to ask for sure. So I'm wondering if, well, first of all, if anybody else has any other questions, please make sure you're typing them in. We have her extreme knowledge for another 9 minutes, so please do take advantage of this. But I'm just wondering too if there's a way to even spot some areas, if the board is disconnected in the board interview process.
I always try to understand the pattern. How do people resolve differences? How do people address issues? Because it's all about, how do you deal with challenges? If everything goes well, if everything is going hunky dory, there's no problems, right? Everybody is kind of riding the wave. But the problems usually arise when challenges become inevitable, when challenges start with economy goes down, the company, something happens with the company, the product is not selling, and then there's stress level. So the questions, when I for example interview board members, I try to understand what is their pattern, how do they deal with challenges, with stress. And when I communicate to them, do they respond to the emails? Do they use names? Do they can they maintain that emotional connection, that politeness, that respect with each other, even though they are feeling stressed, even though there's a sense of, we're going to lose the company? That's what will determine to me if that person is reliable and can be on your side, and can be on your side and be supportive even though something happens. I'll give you a great example. Bill Campbell, he was a CEO of Intuit, but before he became the CEO, he was given a challenge to start a new company. It's called the Go Corporation, and these investors gave him millions and millions of dollars to create a product. Well, unfortunately, he lost all of the money, but the employees said that it was the best place to work with. Why? And the one of the investors recommended him for the CEO for Intuit. Why? Because he knew how to create safety for people. even when the time is challenging. He knew that investors want updates, consistent communication, even though the news is bad. So when you know how to create that connection with people, you will create a lot of safety, and people will give you chances and chances and chances because they know that you have their best and you want to connect with them and they feel safe.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Yep. Well, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Thrilled to have you. We
Thank
don't
you,
have
Sheila.
questions coming in, and really great content. Thrilled to have this in our content library. And, we have the contact information up there if you would like to reach out to Lola, and our information as well. If you would like any other information on us, just email us at info@womenintheboardroom.com or go to our website at womenintheboardroom.com. So thanks again, Lola. Thanks all of you for joining us today, and hope to see you soon.